fresh out of med school, barely known by name. She was ignored during the mission prep. "Observe, don't intervene," they told her. But when an IED left the captain bleeding out and the field medic froze, she stepped forward. Calmly. Precisely. She performed a procedure no one else dared to try, and stabilized him before the bird arrived. When they landed back at base, the CO asked who saved his life. Everyone pointed to the rookie. The girl no one took seriously just saved the chain of command. From which city in the world are you watching this video today? If you enjoy stories that reveal the extraordinary strength found in moments of profound loss and unexpected recognition, consider subscribing for more content that explores the triumph of the human spirit when honor meets heartbreak. The morning mist hung heavy over Arlington National Cemetery as hundreds of uniformed personnel gathered for the memorial service of Colonel Marcus Thompson, a decorated veteran who had served 3 tours in Afghanistan before succumbing to injuries sustained in his final deployment. The pristine white headstones stretched endlessly in perfect rows, each marking a life given in service to country, while the solemn atmosphere reflected the weight of sacrifice that permeated every corner of this sacred ground. Among the assembled mourners stood Sarah Thompson, the colonel's widow, dressed in simple black attire that contrasted sharply with the elaborate military uniforms surrounding her. At 42, Sarah carried herself with quiet dignity despite the devastating loss that had shattered her world 6 months earlier. Her auburn hair was pulled back in a modest bun, and her green eyes, though red-rimmed from countless sleepless nights, maintained the strength that had sustained her through 20 years of military marriage. She stood apart from the main gathering, uncertain of her place among the high-ranking officers and seasoned veterans who had known Marcus in ways she sometimes felt she never could. Brigadier General Patricia Hammond approached the podium with measured steps, her ceremonial uniform adorned with ribbons that told the story of a distinguished career spanning 3 decades. At 55, Hammond had broken numerous barriers as one of the highest-ranking women in the Army, earning respect through competence and dedication rather than seeking attention or recognition. Her presence at Marcus Thompson's memorial service spoke to the esteem in which he had been held by the military leadership. "We gather today to honor Colonel Marcus Thompson, a soldier who embodied the finest traditions of military service," Hammond began, her voice carrying across the cemetery with practiced authority. His leadership, courage, and unwavering commitment to his fellow soldiers left an indelible mark on everyone who served under his command. He was a warrior, a leader, and above all, a man who understood that true strength comes from protecting those who cannot protect themselves. The assembled crowd listened in respectful silence as Hammond detailed Thompson's career, from his early days as a second lieutenant fresh out of West Point to his final deployment as a battalion commander responsible for the lives of hundreds of soldiers. Sarah found herself learning details about her husband's service that he had never shared, understanding for the first time the full scope of the burdens he had carried even when he was home with their family. Captain David Rodriguez stood among the honor guard, his dress uniform perfectly pressed and his bearing reflecting the pride he felt in being selected for this solemn duty. At 28, Rodriguez had served under Thompson during the colonel's final deployment, witnessing firsthand the leadership qualities that had earned Thompson the respect and loyalty of his soldiers. The captain's face remained stoically composed, but his eyes betrayed the grief he felt for a commander who had become more than just a superior officer. Sergeant Major William Foster, a 26-year veteran approaching retirement, commanded the honor guard detail with the precision that had defined his military career. Foster had served with Thompson on multiple deployments, developing a professional relationship that had evolved into genuine friendship and mutual respect. His selection to lead the honor guard represented recognition of his exemplary service and his personal connection to the fallen colonel. The ceremony proceeded with military precision, each element carefully choreographed to honor Thompson's memory while providing comfort to his survivors. The honor guard stood at attention, their rifles gleaming in the morning sun, while the color guard maintained perfect formation despite the emotional weight of the occasion. Sarah watched the proceedings with a mixture of pride and sorrow, grateful for the recognition her husband was receiving while struggling with the finality of the ceremony. Lieutenant Colonel James Morrison, Thompson's executive officer during his final deployment, stepped forward to deliver personal remarks about his fallen commander. Morrison had worked closely with Thompson for 18 months, coordinating operations and managing the administrative responsibilities that allowed the colonel to focus on leading his soldiers. His words painted a picture of a leader who genuinely cared about the welfare of his troops while maintaining the professional standards necessary for mission success. Colonel Thompson understood that leadership isn't about giving orders, Morrison said, his voice steady despite the emotion underlying his words. It's about creating conditions where good people can do their best work while knowing that someone has their back. He never asked his soldiers to do anything he wouldn't do himself, and he never forgot that behind every uniform was a person with family, dreams, and fears just like his own. The honor guard began their ceremonial movements, executing each drill with the precision that reflected thousands of hours of practice and preparation. The synchronized steps and rifle movements represented more than military pageantry. They embodied the discipline, teamwork, and attention to detail that Thompson had instilled in the soldiers under his command. Sarah watched the display with growing appreciation for the military culture that had shaped her husband's life. Master Sergeant Robert Kim approached Sarah with gentle respect, his weathered face reflecting the experience of someone who had attended too many ceremonies like this one. Kim had served as Thompson's senior non-commissioned officer, providing the practical expertise and soldier wisdom that complemented the colonel's strategic vision. His presence at Sarah's side represented the military family's commitment to caring for the survivors of fallen comrades. "Ma'am, I wanted you to know that your husband saved more lives than any official record will ever show," Kim said quietly, his voice carrying the sincerity of someone who had witnessed Thompson's leadership under the most challenging circumstances. He had a way of making every soldier feel valued and important, regardless of their rank or position. That kind of leadership doesn't come from training manuals, it comes from character. Sarah nodded gratefully, touched by Kim's words while struggling to process the reality that her husband was truly gone. The military honors, the formal speeches, and the ceremonial precision created a surreal atmosphere that seemed disconnected from the private grief she carried. She found herself wondering how many other military widows had stood in similar circumstances, trying to reconcile their personal loss with the public recognition of their spouse's service. The chaplain approached the podium to offer words of comfort and hope, drawing from both religious tradition and military custom to address the assembled mourners. Chaplain Michael Torres had deployed with Thompson's unit, providing spiritual guidance and pastoral care to soldiers facing the stress and uncertainty of combat operations. His presence at the memorial service represented the military's recognition that soldiers are more than just warriors. They are human beings with spiritual needs and emotional vulnerabilities. Colonel Thompson's legacy extends far beyond his military accomplishments, Torres said, his voice carrying the warmth and compassion that had made him a trusted confidant to countless soldiers. He understood that true heroism isn't found in individual acts of courage, but in the daily commitment to serving something greater than ourselves. His influence will continue through the lives he touched, the soldiers he mentored, and the example he set for future generations. The honor guard prepared for the rifle salute, a tradition that dates back centuries and represents the military's final tribute to a fallen comrade. The 3 volleys would symbolize the belief that the deceased has been properly honored and can rest in peace, while the precision of the ceremony would demonstrate the military's commitment to maintaining standards even in moments of profound grief. Sarah braced herself for the sharp crack of rifles that would mark another milestone in her journey toward acceptance of her loss. Private First Class Jennifer Martinez stood in the second row of mourners, her dress blue uniform marking her as one of the youngest soldiers present at the ceremony. Martinez had served under Thompson for only 8 months before his death, but the colonel's mentorship had profoundly impacted her understanding of military service and leadership. At 21, she was still learning to navigate the complex emotions that came with losing a respected commander and father figure. Staff Sergeant Michael Chun positioned himself near the family section, his role as casualty assistance officer requiring him to provide support and guidance to Thompson's survivors throughout the difficult process of military funeral arrangements. Chun had worked closely with Sarah over the past several days, helping her understand military traditions while ensuring that her family's wishes were respected within the framework of military protocol. His presence represented the Army's commitment to caring for military families during their most vulnerable moments. The assembled mourners included soldiers from Thompson's current and previous units, creating a diverse gathering that reflected the breadth of his influence throughout his 20-year career. Sergeants who had served under him as lieutenants stood alongside junior officers he had mentored and senior leaders who had recognized his potential for greater responsibility. The variety of ranks and backgrounds represented the colonel's ability to connect with people at every level of military hierarchy. Major Susan Williams, Thompson's operations officer, stood with other members of the battalion staff who had worked directly under his command during the deployment that claimed his life. Williams had coordinated closely with Thompson on tactical planning and mission execution, developing deep respect for his ability to balance mission requirements with genuine concern for soldier welfare. Her presence at the memorial service reflected both professional duty and personal grief for a leader who had become a trusted mentor. The bagpiper began playing Amazing Grace, the haunting melody floating across the cemetery and creating an atmosphere of profound solemnity that touched every person present. The music represented a military tradition that transcended specific denominations or beliefs, offering comfort through shared recognition of loss and hope for peace beyond earthly suffering. Sarah felt tears streaming down her face as the familiar hymn reminded her of her husband's faith and the strength he had drawn from his spiritual beliefs. As the honor guard raised their rifles for the traditional three-volley salute, something unexpected happened that would transform the ceremony from routine military protocol into something far more meaningful. Sergeant Major Foster, standing in the center of the formation, made a decision that violated decades of training and military tradition. Instead of maintaining his position at attention, he stepped forward and walked directly towards Sarah Thompson. The movement created a ripple of confusion through the assembled crowd, as military personnel accustomed to precise ceremonial procedures tried to understand what was happening. Foster's action was unprecedented in the formal structure of military funerals, where every movement is choreographed and deviation from protocol is unthinkable. Yet there was something in Foster's bearing that suggested this was not a mistake or moment of confusion, but a deliberate choice made for reasons that transcended military regulation. Captain Rodriguez followed Foster's lead, stepping out of formation and moving towards Sarah with the same purposeful stride. His decision to break protocol represented a significant risk to his military career, as deviation from ceremonial procedures during official functions was typically met with serious disciplinary action. Yet Rodriguez's face showed no hesitation or uncertainty. His movement was deliberate and respectful, suggesting that he was acting from conviction rather than impulse. One by one, the remaining members of the honor guard abandoned their formation and walked towards Sarah Thompson, creating a scene that had never occurred in the long history of Arlington National Cemetery. The movement was not chaotic or disorganized. Each soldier maintained military bearing and moved with purpose and dignity. The sight of uniformed personnel breaking formation sent murmurs through the assembled crowd, but also created an atmosphere of anticipation and respect. General Hammond watched the unprecedented scene unfold with a mixture of concern and curiosity, understanding that this deviation from protocol would require explanation and potentially disciplinary action, yet sensing that something significant was occurring that transcended normal military procedures. Her years of experience had taught her to recognize moments when rigid adherence to regulation might be less important than responding to human needs and circumstances that couldn't be anticipated in policy manuals. The honor guard members formed a semicircle around Sarah Thompson, their rifles held at present arms in a display that honored both her husband's memory and her own sacrifice as a military widow. The formation was spontaneous yet respectful, creating an intimate space within the larger ceremony that acknowledged Sarah's unique position as the person most affected by Thompson's death. The soldiers' faces reflected genuine respect and compassion rather than mere ceremonial obligation. Sergeant Major Foster spoke first, his voice carrying the weight of experience and genuine emotion. "Ma'am, we're not here just because regulations require it. We're here because Colonel Thompson earned our respect and loyalty, and we want you to know that his sacrifice meant something to every one of us. You shared him with the Army for 20 years, and we want you to know that we understand what that cost you and your family. The words broke through the formal barriers that typically separate military ceremony from personal emotion, creating a moment of genuine human connection that transcended rank, protocol, and institutional structure. Sarah felt tears streaming down her face as she realized that these soldiers were honoring not just her husband's service, but her own sacrifice as a military spouse who had endured countless deployments, relocations, and separations in support of her husband's career. Captain Rodriguez stepped forward with a folded American flag, but instead of presenting it with the traditional formal language, he spoke from the heart. Colonel Thompson talked about you and your children constantly. He carried your pictures everywhere and made sure we all understood that everything we did was ultimately about protecting families like yours. This flag represents not just his service, but your service as the family that supported him through everything. The gesture transformed the traditional flag presentation from a ceremonial obligation into a personal acknowledgement of Sarah's role in her husband's military career. She accepted the flag with trembling hands, understanding for the first time that the military community viewed her not as an outsider looking in, but as an integral part of the family that had sustained her husband throughout his service. The recognition was both overwhelming and deeply meaningful. Lieutenant Colonel Morrison approached from the main assembly, his face showing understanding and approval of the Honor Guard's actions. As Thompson's executive officer, Morrison had witnessed countless examples of the colonel's devotion to his family and understood that honoring Sarah was entirely consistent with Thompson's values and priorities. His presence validated the Honor Guard's decision to break protocol in favor of genuine human recognition. Mrs. Thompson, Morrison said, his voice carrying official authority combined with personal warmth. What you're witnessing here is unprecedented, but it's also entirely appropriate. Your husband earned the loyalty of these soldiers not just through his military competence, but through his character and integrity. They're honoring you because they know how much you meant to him and how much you sacrificed to support his service. The chaplain joined the group surrounding Sarah, offering both spiritual comfort and practical guidance for navigating the complex emotions stirred by this unexpected recognition. Torres had counseled countless military families through loss and understood that grief follows no predetermined timeline or pattern. His presence provided continuity between the formal ceremony and the personal journey that Sarah would continue long after the memorial service concluded. What's happening here reflects the best of military tradition, Torres explained gently. Yes, we have protocols and procedures, but we also have values that sometimes require us to go beyond regulations to do what's right. These soldiers are showing you the same loyalty and respect they showed your husband, and that's exactly what he would have wanted. The spontaneous ceremony within the ceremony continued as other soldiers from Thompson's unit began approaching Sarah, each offering personal memories and expressions of gratitude for her husband's leadership. The formal structure of the memorial service gave way to something more organic and meaningful, as the military community demonstrated that behind the uniforms and protocols were real people with genuine emotions and connections. Sergeant First Class Maria Santos approached with a letter written by soldiers from Thompson's unit, expressing their collective appreciation for his leadership and their recognition of Sarah's sacrifice. Santos had served as the unit's senior medic and had witnessed Thompson's care for his soldiers' welfare under the most challenging circumstances. Her presence represented the entire enlisted community that had served under Thompson's command. "Ma'am, we wanted you to have this," Santos said, presenting the letter with military precision but obvious emotion. "It's from all of us who served under the colonel. We wanted you to know that he never stopped talking about how proud he was of you and your children, and how much strength he drew from knowing you were supporting him back home." The letter represented something more valuable than any official commendation or military decoration. It was genuine recognition from the soldiers whose lives had been directly affected by Thompson's leadership. Sarah accepted it with profound gratitude, understanding that she was receiving something that no regulation or protocol could have provided: authentic appreciation from the military family that had shared her husband's final years. General Hammond approached the group, her expression showing both understanding and official concern for the deviation from established protocol. As the senior officer present, she bore responsibility for addressing the break in ceremony, while also recognizing the genuine emotion and respect that had motivated the honor guard's actions. Her response would set the tone for how this unprecedented event would be remembered and potentially addressed through official channels. Sergeant Major Foster, Hammond said, her voice carrying official authority tempered with human understanding. Your actions today were outside established protocol, but they were also entirely consistent with the values that Colonel Thompson represented. Sometimes the spirit of military tradition requires us to go beyond the letter of regulations, and I believe this is one of those times. The general's words effectively validated the honor guard's decision while acknowledging the complexity of balancing military discipline with human compassion. Her statement demonstrated the leadership wisdom that had earned her promotion to general officer rank, the ability to recognize when flexibility and judgment should supersede rigid adherence to regulation. The moment represented military leadership at its finest. Foster responded with military bearing intact, but obvious relief at the general's understanding. Ma'am, we felt that honoring Mrs. Thompson's sacrifice was consistent with honoring the colonel's memory. Everything he taught us about leadership emphasized taking care of people and doing what's right, even when it's not explicitly covered in the manual. The exchange between Foster and Hammond illustrated the tension that exists in military culture between maintaining discipline and recognizing the human elements that give meaning to military service. The honor guard's actions represented a spontaneous decision to prioritize human dignity and genuine respect over ceremonial perfection, a choice that resonated with the deeper values that Thompson had embodied throughout his career. As the informal ceremony continued, other family members began joining the group around Sarah, creating an expanding circle of military and civilian mourners united in their desire to honor Thompson's memory and support his survivors. The rigid separation between military protocol and family grief dissolved into something more inclusive and meaningful, demonstrating that the military community's care extends beyond active duty personnel to embrace the families who share their sacrifices. Thompson's brother, a civilian who had always felt somewhat outside the military culture that defined his brother's life, approached Sarah with visible emotion. I never really understood what Marcus meant when he talked about the military family, he said, his voice thick with tears. But seeing how these people are honoring you and treating you as one of their own, I finally get it. This isn't just a job or a career, it's something deeper. The brothers' recognition reflected the difficulty that civilian family members often experience in understanding military culture and the bonds that develop between service members and their families. The honor guard's spontaneous action had created a bridge between the military and civilian worlds, demonstrating that the values of loyalty, respect, and mutual support transcend the boundaries of formal military structure. Sarah's teenage daughter approached tentatively, overwhelmed by the attention and emotion surrounding the ceremony. At 16, she had spent her entire life as part of the military community, but had never fully appreciated the depth of respect her father had earned from his soldiers. The unprecedented recognition her mother was receiving helped her understand that her family's sacrifices had been noticed and valued by the people her father had served with. "Mom," she whispered, "I had no idea Dad meant so much to all these people. I mean, I knew he was important, but seeing them break their formation just to honor you, it makes me understand why he was so proud to be a soldier." The daughter's words captured the intergenerational impact of military service and the way that moments of recognition can help family members understand the significance of their loved one's career and sacrifice. Her newfound appreciation for her father's service and her mother's role represented the lasting value of the honor guard's decision to prioritize human connection over ceremonial protocol. Private Martinez stepped forward hesitantly, her youth and junior rank making her uncertain about approaching such a senior gathering. However, her genuine emotion and desire to honor Thompson's memory overcame her hesitation. "Mrs. Thompson, your husband was the first officer who treated me like I mattered. He knew my name from day one and always asked about my family back home. He made me want to be a better soldier." The young private's words illustrated Thompson's impact on soldiers at every level of the military hierarchy. His ability to connect with junior personnel while maintaining command presence had created loyalty that extended throughout his unit. Martinez's courage in speaking up despite her junior status demonstrated the profound influence that effective leadership can have on developing soldiers. Corporal James Butler, a combat veteran who had served multiple deployments under different commanders, offered his perspective on Thompson's unique leadership style. "Ma'am, I've served under a lot of officers, but Colonel Thompson was different. He never forgot that behind every uniform was a real person with real problems. He helped me work through some personal issues that could have ended my career, and he did it without making me feel like a burden." Butler's testimony reflected the complex challenges that military leaders face in balancing mission requirements with genuine care for their soldiers' personal welfare. Thompson's ability to provide support and guidance while maintaining military standards had created an environment where soldiers felt valued as individuals rather than simply as resources for mission accomplishment. The gathering around Sarah continued to grow as more soldiers and officers shared their memories and expressed their gratitude for Thompson's leadership. Each personal account added depth to the portrait of a leader who had touched lives in ways that extended far beyond official duty requirements. The spontaneous sharing created a memorial that was more meaningful than any formal ceremony could have provided. Staff Sergeant Lisa Rodriguez, no relation to Captain Rodriguez, approached with her own tribute to Thompson's influence on her military career. "Mrs. Thompson, your husband recommended me for promotion when other leaders thought I wasn't ready. He saw potential in me that I didn't even see in myself. He changed the trajectory of my entire career by believing in me when others didn't." Rodriguez's story highlighted Thompson's ability to recognize and develop talent in his subordinates, a characteristic that had contributed to the success of numerous soldiers who had served under his command. His willingness to advocate for deserving personnel, even when it involved some risk to his own reputation, demonstrated the courage and integrity that had earned him widespread respect throughout the military community. The informal ceremony had been continuing for over an hour, with no sign that the flow of personal tributes was diminishing. The spontaneous nature of the gathering had created space for genuine expressions of grief, gratitude, and respect that would have been impossible within the constraints of formal military protocol. The mourners seemed reluctant to end this opportunity for authentic connection and shared remembrance. Technical Sergeant Robert Washington, an Air Force liaison who had worked with Thompson on joint operations, offered an inter-service perspective on the colonel's leadership. "Mrs. Thompson, your husband understood that effective military operations require cooperation across all branches of service. He treated Air Force personnel with the same respect and consideration he showed his own soldiers. That kind of leadership is rare and valuable." Washington's comments illustrated Thompson's ability to work effectively in joint military environments, where success depends on building relationships and trust across service boundaries. His inclusive leadership style had created positive working relationships that enhanced mission effectiveness, while demonstrating respect for the contributions of all service members regardless of their branch affiliation. The sun had reached its peak, casting strong shadows across Arlington National Cemetery as the informal memorial continued. The contrast between the formal military precision of the morning ceremony and the organic, heartfelt sharing that had developed created a profound experience that honored both military tradition and human emotion. The day had evolved into something that no planning or protocol could have achieved. Major Patricia Evans, a military police officer who had worked with Thompson on base security issues, shared her perspective on his collaborative leadership style. "Mrs. Thompson, your husband never pulled rank or demanded cooperation just because of his position. He earned it through his competence and his genuine respect for the expertise that other people brought to their jobs. He made everyone around him better at what they did." Evans's testimony reflected Thompson's understanding that effective leadership requires recognizing and leveraging the strengths of team members rather than simply issuing orders and expecting compliance. His collaborative approach had created high-performing teams that achieved exceptional results while maintaining morale and unit cohesion. The gathering around Sarah had become a powerful example of military community at its finest, demonstrating the bonds that develop between service members and their families when leadership creates an environment of mutual respect and genuine care. The Honor Guard's decision to break formation had catalyzed something that transcended formal ceremony, creating space for authentic human connection and shared grief. Captain Michael Torres, a chaplain's assistant who had worked closely with the unit chaplain, offered spiritual perspective on Thompson's impact. "Mrs. Thompson, Your husband understood that taking care of soldiers meant caring about their spiritual and emotional needs as well as their physical welfare. He encouraged soldiers to seek help when they needed it and made sure resources were available for those struggling with personal issues. Torres's comments highlighted Thompson's holistic approach to leadership that recognized soldiers as complete human beings rather than simply military assets. His support for programs addressing mental health, family issues, and spiritual needs had created an environment where soldiers felt comfortable seeking help when facing personal challenges. As the afternoon progressed, the informal memorial began to transition toward conclusion, though the emotional connections formed during the extended gathering would continue long after the physical ceremony ended. The Honor Guard's unprecedented action had created something unique in military tradition, a ceremony that honored both formal military values and authentic human emotion in equal measure. Sergeant Major Foster approached Sarah one final time to ensure that she understood the significance of what had occurred. "Ma'am, what happened here today has never happened before in my 26 years of service. But it felt like exactly what Colonel Thompson would have wanted. He always put people before procedure, and he would have been proud to see his soldiers honoring his family the way they honored you today." Foster's words provided context for the unprecedented nature of the ceremony, while connecting it to Thompson's own leadership philosophy and values. The Honor Guard's actions had not been random or impulsive. They had been a direct reflection of the lessons Thompson had taught them about leadership, loyalty, and the importance of taking care of people. Their decision to break formation had honored his memory in the most authentic way possible. General Hammond made a point of speaking privately with Sarah before departing, offering both official condolences and personal recognition of her role as a military spouse. "Mrs. Thompson, what you witnessed today reflects the highest traditions of military service, the willingness to do what's right regardless of personal cost. Your husband earned this loyalty through 20 years of putting his soldiers first, and they wanted to honor you because they know how much you contributed to his success." The general's words provided official validation for the Honor Guard's actions while acknowledging Sarah's often overlooked contributions to her husband's military career. Military spouses frequently sacrifice their own careers, endure extended separations, and manage family responsibilities alone while their partners serve, yet their contributions are rarely recognized in formal military settings. The day's events had provided that recognition in the most meaningful way possible. Colonel Patricia Barnes, Thompson's immediate superior during his final assignment, offered administrative perspective on his exceptional performance as a battalion commander. "Mrs. Thompson, your husband's unit consistently achieved the highest performance ratings in our brigade. More importantly, they had the lowest rates of disciplinary problems and the highest re-enlistment rates. That kind of success comes from leadership that genuinely cares about people." Barnes's statistical analysis provided concrete evidence of Thompson's effectiveness as a leader while illustrating the practical benefits that result from treating soldiers as valued individuals rather than expendable resources. His approach to leadership had created measurable improvements in unit performance that benefited both the military mission and the soldiers under his command. The extended ceremony had provided opportunities for authentic mourning and celebration of Thompson's life that would have been impossible within the constraints of traditional military protocol. The spontaneous sharing of memories and expressions of gratitude had created a memorial experience that honored both his military service and his impact as a human being who genuinely cared about the people around him. As the gathering finally began to disperse, Sarah found herself surrounded by business cards, phone numbers, and invitations to stay in contact with the military community that had embraced her so warmly. The Honor Guard's decision to break formation had not only honored her husband's memory, but had also created lasting connections that would provide ongoing support during her journey through grief and adjustment to life without her spouse. Sergeant First Class David Kim, Thompson's former driver and security detail leader, offered practical assistance for Sarah's transition to civilian life. "Mrs. Thompson, if you need help with anything, moving, paperwork, benefits questions, please don't hesitate to call." The colonel always said that taking care of families was just as important as taking care of soldiers, and we want to make sure you get the support you need. Kim's offer reflected the military community's understanding that supporting survivors extends beyond the funeral ceremony to include practical assistance with the complex challenges of adjusting to life after military service. His willingness to provide ongoing help demonstrated the lasting bonds that develop within military units and the commitment to caring for the families of fallen comrades. As Sarah prepared to leave Arlington National Cemetery, she carried with her not just the traditional symbols of military honor, the folded flag, the condolence letters, and the official recognition of her husband's service, but also something far more valuable: the knowledge that she was truly part of a military family that valued her sacrifice and would continue to support her in the difficult journey ahead. The Honor Guard's decision to break formation had transformed a routine military funeral into a powerful demonstration of the values that give meaning to military service: loyalty, respect, mutual support, and the understanding that true strength comes from taking care of one another. Sarah's recognition as more than just a grieving widow, but as an integral part of the military community, represented the finest expression of military tradition and honor. The story of the day when the Honor Guard broke formation would be told and retold throughout the military community, serving as an example of leadership that transcends regulation and demonstrates the human values that make military service meaningful. For Sarah Thompson, it marked the beginning of a new understanding of her place in the military family and the lasting impact of her husband's service on the lives of the soldiers he led. The unprecedented ceremony had shown that sometimes the most important moments occur when people choose to follow their hearts rather than their orders, when human compassion supersedes institutional protocol, and when genuine respect finds expression in spontaneous action. The Honor Guard's decision to honor Sarah Thompson had honored the memory of Colonel Marcus Thompson in the most fitting way possible, by demonstrating the values he had lived by and the loyalty he had inspired in the soldiers under his command. As the last of the mourners departed Arlington National Cemetery, the pristine white headstones stood as silent witnesses to what had occurred that morning. Among the thousands of markers representing lives given in service to country, Colonel Marcus Thompson's grave would be remembered not just for the soldier it honored, but for the day when military tradition bent to accommodate military values, when protocol gave way to compassion, and when a widow discovered that she was truly part of something larger than herself. The morning mist had lifted, revealing the full scope of Arlington National Cemetery's solemn beauty, but the memory of what had occurred would remain with everyone who witnessed it. The Honor Guard had broken formation, but in doing so, they had demonstrated the unbreakable bonds that define military service at its finest. Sarah Thompson had come to the cemetery as a widow attending her husband's memorial service. She left as a recognized member of the military family, honored for her own sacrifice and assured of continued support from the community that had meant so much to her husband. The day when the Honor Guard broke formation would be remembered as a moment when military tradition evolved to embrace its highest values, when the rigid structure of ceremony gave way to the flexible strength of human compassion, and when a group of soldiers chose to honor not just their fallen commander, but the family who had supported him throughout his career. It was military tradition at its finest, not because it followed regulations, but because it embodied the values that make military service meaningful and noble.